It's recording. Alright. Let me have your attention, please. We are now in section 311. We are solving rational equations. When you see the word solve for directions, like on your 9 weeks exam or on the EOCT, when you see the word solve, immediately what comes to mind? X equals. Okay? And if it's just X in the problem, then X equals probably one number. It might not equal any number, right? You have to check it. But if you just have X, then you're only going to have one answer. If you have X squared, then how many answers potentially could you have? Two answers. You could have 5 and 1, or 6 and 0, or -7 and -2. You could have 2 answers. And so on and so on. X cubed could potentially give you 3 answers. You have to check it. Okay? But when you see the word solve, I'm trying to reiterate that those directions mean to solve. Okay? First example here is 6 over x plus 5 equals, right, we have an equal sign, x over 6. Okay, copy that down. Here's your first example. Now, before this, we added this stuff, right? We had to find an LCD. Or, don't write these down, or we subtracted. What else did we do with rational equations? We added and subtracted. What else did we do? We multiplied and we divided. What do you do when you have to divide? Flip the second one and multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. So now we're solving and we have an equal sign, but the rules that we learned when we added, subtracted, multiplied, and divided, those rules still come into play. We're still going to have to find LCDs. Okay? We're still going to have to multiply. We're still going to have to check our answer. Okay? If I asked you for an excluded value in this problem right off the bat, could you tell me the excluded value? Yes. What is it? -5 is an excluded value. We know before we start that x cannot equal -5. Why not? Boyd, tell me why -5 doesn't work. And why can't we have 0 in the denominator? Because it's bad, right? We can never divide by 0, right? Remember I wrote bad on the board? Okay, you cannot divide by 0, ever. Alright? So, we know the excluded value. Write that down. Excluded value is -5. Don't forget information that we already know. And I'm trying to review you a little bit. Make sure we're all on the same page. If I'm doing a problem that looks like this, and I have a fraction equals a fraction, these are fairly easy. All I'm going to do is cross multiply. Okay? Fraction equal a fraction. I can go straight into cross multiply and I get x times x plus 5 equals 6 times 6, which is 36. Now I wrote it out like this. I won't do that from here on out, but I wrote it out right here to remind you to do what? Math word starts with a D. Distribute. I must distribute the x there and there. Don't forget to distribute. So I get x squared plus 5x is equal to 36. Now what do I have to do with the 36? I need to move it over to the other side, setting it equal to 0, right? I've got a quadratic. I've got x squared here. I know that this needs to be 0 over here. So I need to move the 36 over by subtraction. Subtract 36 from both sides. So I have x squared plus 5x minus 36 is equal to 0. Now, raise your hand if you know what to do now. What am I going to do now? Yeah? Factor. Outstanding. Why is this quadratic fairly easy to factor?
It's a trinomial.
It's a trinomial. What else? A is equal to what? 1. And when A is 1, it's pretty easy to factor. Right? I do my parentheses. I know that one's plus and one's minus. I know I got x and x. What are my factors of 36 that have a difference of positive 5? 9 and 4. Which one needs to be positive? The 9 needs to be positive and the 4 needs to be negative. This is still equal to 0. I know I'm writing down. I'll write it up here. What are my two answers if my factors are x plus 9 and x minus 4?
X minus 9.
Minus 9 and positive 4. Are those my two answers? Potentially. Potentially those are my two answers. Right? We know that -5 is not an answer because it's excluded. Okay, so if one of these had been -5, we could have thrown that out right now. But when we get to this step, because we cross-multiplied, we've got to check them. You're checking for extraneous solutions. Remember that word? What's the root word of extraneous?
Extra.
Extra. So one of these, or both of them, could be extra. We've got to check them. So how do I check? I take -9 and I put it right there. And I take -9 and I put it right there. I check it by plugging in -9 here and here. On my calculator, I say 6 over -9 plus 5 and see if that equals -9 over 6. It does, because both of these equal -3 over 2, if I'm not mistaken. Right? So you check them. You plug in -9 into both scenarios. Are you done? Now what do you need to check? You need to check +4. So right here, I put a 4 right there, and I put a 4 right there, plugging in for x. And I get 6 over 4 plus 5 equals 4 over 6. That's 6 over 9 equals 4 over 6 equals 2 over 3, I think. And that works. Right? So plugging in a 4 works. -9 worked, and +4 worked. Is it mandatory to check your answers in these problems?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Okay? Yes, it is. What would be the cheater way of doing this problem if it was a SAT or a, hold on,